Hello, role-playing people, and today we're going to talk about performing versus portraying the character. We're going to define these terms in a little while, but it needs to be said, while performing a character can definitely take your roleplay to the next level, showing off your abilities as an actor, the way you portray the character is absolutely essential for a good immersive game because it shows off your ability and creativity as a writer. Ideally, players use a blend of both when they're playing an RPG because when these two elements are in conjunction, that's when the magic happens. Let's see what goes into performance first. The way I see it, the player is performing their character when they embody and act out the behavior and mannerisms of said character. They do not speak about their protagonist, they do not describe the protagonist from an external point of view, rather they become the protagonist, showing exactly what their response to a certain situation is. The way I see it, the essential elements that go into performing the character are speech patterns, facial expressions, gestures and body language, and any direct display of emotion. Optionally, you can dress up as the character too, maybe use props as well, but that is not essential unless you are LARPing. But why these elements? I think because as human beings, these are the things we notice immediately when interacting with someone. Posture, speech patterns, facial expressions, and all of these elements always tell us something, mostly indirectly, non-verbally, about the person before us. The way we talk and behave gives others information about ourselves without us having to say it directly. If I speak to you in a thick Romanian accent, there is pretty good chance I'm Romanian and I don't have to say it directly, provided you've heard that accent before. Thus, I can show you or let you know that I am Romanian without saying it directly. Suppose we're playing at the table. If I suddenly, with no warning, jump up out of my seat, which screeches across the floor, point a finger in your face while clenching my jaw and bark at you between my teeth. Say that again. Say that one more time and I'll show you business, you... Then you know, whatever my fictional interlocutor said to me, it made me angry, right? Ready to escalate my displeasure to physical aggression. And in this case, body language and tone of voice speak volumes about my attitude and emotional state. Dressing up as the character and using props can, again, help with showing instead of telling. If I want my character to slowly pull out a gun or some kind of weapon on somebody during a conversation, all I have to do is make sure that I have my toy gun in my pocket and slowly pull it out as I'm talking from the hip, pointing it at the other person. Obviously, there are limits here. No touching, no hitting, no actual shooting, please, no anything like that. You're doing this towards the other player or GM to show what your protagonist does, but you're not doing it to them. And definitely make sure beforehand that everyone is okay with such means of performing the character and such uses of props. If they are not, if it makes people uncomfortable, don't do it. Maybe when a protagonist is anxious, they might exhibit a nervous tic or engage in some behavior they find calming, like rocking gently back and forth or biting their lips. Maybe they play with a lighter, clicking the lid. Open, closed, open, closed, or something of this type. Facial expressions are a great tool for showing reactions and expressing yourself without even making a sound. Maybe all the seductress needs to do is lift that eyebrow a little, gaze towards the candle-lit bedroom, then back at her interlocutor, smiling with one corner of the mouth and playfully biting her lip. Very suggestive. If your character wants to face someone, confront someone, stand up straight, shoulders back, head angled back and to the side so that you look downward at your target, making yourself look bigger while crossing your arms in front of you, saying, "Can I help you?" in a confident, slightly annoyed, lowered tone of voice. So all of these things are techniques that players can use to really perform their protagonists, to act them out in a very theatrical fashion. Again, elements include posture, speech patterns such as tone of voice or accent, facial expressions, gestures, clothing, and props. Now we're going to look at portrayal. Portrayal is the act of describing the character's actions, thoughts, or emotions verbally from an external point of view, as if seen by a camera and projected on a screen, or like the storyteller themselves would narrate it, because really all players take turns being the storyteller, at least in regards to their own protagonist's actions. When you, as the player, describe what the Toreador Armand is doing, you are briefly taking on the role of storyteller, and everyone's attention is on you. As opposed to doing it performatively, physically showing others how my character purses her lips or makes various facial expressions, I describe it first, maybe even without performing it in the slightest, right? And I say, Lisa purses her lips in discomfort and worry as she looks down at her shoes and says, and at this point I briefly slip into a very toned-down performance mode. "All right, fine, have it your way. I don't even care." There's a moment of awkward silence after she says that, and she sighs and lights a cigarette. Aha, so Lisa is a smoker. And now you know because you observed it happening through the narrator's presentation of the action, like a video camera shooting the scene. The player didn't have to tell you, "Hey, my character's a smoker." And though they didn't perform it either by pulling out a cigarette and smoking it before your very eyes, they found a way to portray it, to show you one of Lisa's habits. There are limits to both portrayal and performance. I mean, as much as I'd love to perform the triple backflip my character does before landing in a low defensive stance, I can't do that. So I'm just going to narrate it instead, and in doing so, I portray my character as having exceptional athletic ability. I mean, not many people can pull off a triple backflip. It's very important to really know the character and to have ideas not just about what you are portraying, but how you are going to portray it. When and in what circumstances that particular information is going to be revealed. One of my favorite things to do when making a new character is to think of a few key scenes which reveal something about my protagonist without them having to say it to the others verbally. For instance, maybe my vampire character is obsessed with the sun, misses sunlight like crazy, but they can never see the real thing again because it would turn them to ash. So their haven is just packed full of photos and prints and paintings of sunrises and sunsets. They're all over the walls. Should another protagonist enter my haven, they will discover this about my character, their obsession, and they will feel like they know my character a bit better. This here, from my perspective, is the best part. The very reason why I think portrayal will always trump performance. The fact that you reveal things about your character, not just by describing them, the protagonist, but by describing their environment, their haven, their car, their club, whatever it might be, or by interacting with player-made side characters, like retainers, allies, herd, and so on. Let's do an example of the environment revealing something about a character. If, for any reasons, the others go through my protagonist's haven, they're going to find a little trophy room, full of jewelry, pieces of hair, and desiccated skin, as well as photos. Photos of all these young men who went missing over the years. At that point, it becomes pretty clear my protagonist is a serial killer. And this is something they've always kept hidden, something they would always keep hidden. They would not just come out and say this to anyone. But ingenious players will always find alternative ways of portraying a certain character type without acting against the other players. I mean, I don't want them finding out I'm the serial killer because I'm killing them and ending their game. No. Maybe as the coterie gets into Toreador Melissa's car, they see a family photo taped near the dashboard and they realize, oh wow, Melissa had 3 kids before she was embraced and taken away from her loving family forever. That's just horrible, tragic. And just where is that family currently? So now you understand where Melissa is coming from, even though she never talked about it, she never brought it up. Interactions are also great for revealing traits, but there are some interactions you really don't want to do to another player character, like the serial killer we mentioned earlier. Mistress Stanka is a cruel, manipulative Tzimisce who enjoys bossing others around and being feared. The best way I can illustrate that is not by yelling at the other players, disempowering them by ordering them around, flesh crafting their characters into lawn chairs, and ruining their fun by constantly dominating them, but by doing all of that to an NPC side character of Stanka's. Let's say her retainer named Andrew failed to find and purchase a certain object Stanka asked to be brought to her tonight. If Andrew returns empty-handed and Stanka says, "Oh, don't worry about it, dear. I didn't need it that bad. How are you tonight? You seem pale. Are you well?" Then she appears to be quite calm, understanding, and even caring, since she asks Andrew about his well-being. If, on the other hand, she slowly walks towards the cowering Andrew, grabs him by the arm, pulls his muscles straight off the bones in his hand in an agonizing, gruesome display of vicissitude as he begs her to stop and screams in pain, and she whispers in his ear, "Andrew, I told you to bring me that thing. I don't care where you find it or if you have to sell a kidney to get it. I want it tonight. Now get back out there and get it for me like a good little servant. If you don't, you're sleeping with the pigs, my friend. You come back empty-handed again, I'm flaying your other arm too. Go." If she says and does that, oh boy, she's clearly cruel, monstrous, the works. And obviously these very gruesome character attitudes are something the other players should be aware of because of Session 0, so they don't come as an unpredictable shock and possibly ruin the game for someone else. But now they get to actually see them through the way I'm portraying my character. The storyteller in these cases plays a huge role in assisting the portrayal, and any good storyteller will collaborate with the player to create the desired illustration. If Andrew were to defiantly say, "I couldn't care less about what you want, fiend. Get someone else to run your errands. I'm sick of you. I'm out of here," then it's obvious he's not intimidated, which shows that my protagonist isn't that intimidating. But I want the protagonist to be intimidating. That is how I wrote them. That is what my dots show on the sheet. So that's why when I write the character, I make sure to consult with my GM and tell them what I'm hoping to do with the protagonist and how I want to show her traits, at least in the introductory session. So if the GM doesn't actively want to sabotage my efforts, he is going to describe Andrew as shivering, trembling, desperately trying to pull back, to run away even, but the fear coupled with a potent blood bond render him unable to act against Stanka's commands. So Andrew is defenseless before his Domitor. The poor guy, he can't even run. He's a lamb to the slaughter. And that only adds to my portrayal of Stanka as a cruel, frightening monster who abuses those weaker than herself, those she has power over. Alright, having thrown in a few examples and having looked at environment and interactions with other characters, it's time to look at player choice. The way your protagonist reacts to any challenge, mental, physical, or social, in a given scene, and all of the choices they make paint a picture of who they are and what they want. I've noticed it's so tempting for players to optimize, to not only choose the best stats at the character creation phase of the game, but to also make the most profitable choices when the GM presents them with such. Far from me to judge such an approach, provided it's at least mildly in step with what the character might do, so the player doesn't clearly metagame by making a profitable choice their protagonist would have never made, but I've noticed the most amazing scenes we've had at our table at least, regardless of systems, were the ones where the player showed character first and foremost, consequences be damned, in a manner that is consistent with how that character was written. Examples abound, really, but I remember this particular Pathfinder moment when the protagonist was being seduced by a succubus who used her powers to read his mind and take on the form of his lost lover. The protagonist was looking at his dead lover's portrait in a little locket he had, and in she walks, in the flesh, confused, anxious, excited, full of love. The player obviously knew something was wrong, and there's no way he'd meet his dead lover in some room of a random tavern in a whole nother realm, but he remained in character. He called out her name as tears streaked down his cheeks. With trembling hands, he caressed her face and kissed her warm lips. I told him to make a save, my reason being that the succubus was only using a pretty basic illusion, and he said, "Please, can I just fail the roll? I don't care if I get one-shotted right now, ambushed or dragged to hell. I don't care who or what this creature is. I just want to kiss my lover's lips one more time and tell her I'm sorry." Absolutely splendid scene, heartbreaking. The entire room fell silent and was in awe at the visceral, authentic roleplay in a moment in which the player became the character, not by performing him, but by portraying him appropriately, making the same choice the character would have made. If the player had gone, "Aha, there's no way Jana could be in this crummy tavern. I disbelieve this person." Sure, that would have been a valid way to go about it, but it would have shown nothing about the character's deep emotional trauma of having lost the only person they'd ever loved, and the longing how much he still craved to be with her somehow. This is why having a complex, well-fleshed-out character who also has flaws and portraying them consistently does so much. Not just for the GM, because he has a lot of things to work with and can make the story personal, but for the entire group who gets to enjoy every protagonist and the stories they bring to the table. See, every now and then, players get caught up in combat and numbers and optimizations, and all of those things will create an enjoyable, empowering interaction for sure, but it rarely entertains anyone else but the player who does the min-maxing. I find that telling the immersive, personal, distinct story of each protagonist is considerably more rewarding for everyone involved. It doesn't detract from the plot or the main story arc of the game, the story of the entire group, as it were, and it reaffirms to the player that their choices matter, and they should. This is where we can and will, in another episode, make the distinction between empowering the player, giving them control over narrative possibilities, giving them the ability to create scenes and reveal more about their protagonist, and empowering the character, giving them more superpowers or higher numbers, which might be fun for a combat-oriented game, but might not give the player more narrative power, simply more mechanical means of dealing with challenges. The reason I made this episode is to remind anyone who might be listening of the importance of portrayal. Starting out with RPGs, I used to be all about the performance, making sure I'm doing voices, accents, or showing emotions, gesticulating, making facial expressions, and so on. But I quickly discovered a good performance doesn't necessarily make a good character. It just makes for a good show. If someone tells me, okay, this is the scene where you tremble with impotent anger and burst into tears. Sure, I can probably do that if I work on it a little, but it's just performance in a void, an isolated show of emotion done on command in this case. It offers no context and doesn't reveal anything about why I'm doing that. Sure, it's fun to watch, it's an interesting display, but it's not in itself meaningful or impactful for the story. Context and depth of character come with consistent portrayal and a well-written protagonist. So in recent years, especially after having to play more RPGs online, I stopped focusing on performance and chose to invest more effort into writing a good character, creating and showing aspects of their world, their habitat, devising ways in which I can reveal behaviors, traits, and flaws, and overall just really knowing who the character is and visualizing them as well and as vividly as I can in order to describe them better. Yes, this means I've become considerably more descriptive, more writerly, if we can put it that way, but especially for online games played without video, this is gold. It enhances the experience so much in a context in which you can't see the gestures, you can't see the facial expressions. And important to note, the way I reveal personal character traits and create interesting little intimate scenes for the other players to explore doesn't derail or negatively impact the story in any way. It actually enriches it by adding more detail and creating a contrast of moods and tones between different scenes. However, it is an undeniable fact that some degree of performance will always be necessary. When performance and portrayal come together to the same extent and offer the best of each, that's when the roleplay experience becomes something both players and GM continue to relive in memories forever. You revisit those scenes years later. It's so good. You will always remember them. So, portrayal, the way we write and reveal our characters, is essential to a storytelling game, but performance will definitely elevate the experience. And just really quickly, one final mention, if I may. Too wide a discrepancy between the way the character is written, intended, and then subsequently portrayed and performed is a mistake. Inevitably, there will be a few differences between player intent and the way they actually present their character to the group during an activity which is otherwise performative and improvised. But when that gap is too wide and there's no consistency, that doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel authentic. So this is something players can work on. It's definitely something that can be improved. Just give it more attention. I have also been guilty of this over the years, and I've seen it happen multiple times when players write a very dark, edgy character, something like the Punisher or Spawn, and then at the table, they portray the character as an easygoing person, always humorous, who clearly hasn't got too much life experience nor reasons to worry, and really, they don't want to manifest all that aggression, they're just trying to save the city and the girl. Yes, but that's not cool. For a very simple reason. You told me during session 0 that you're bringing in the Punisher. The Punisher. And now you're playing the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. And the reverse can also happen, right? Someone tells you they're going to play a more humane Zemiti who isn't too much of a monster. They're an experienced, well-controlled individual. And then in the heat of the very first session, they peel someone's face off and rotate their limbs 180 degrees. What? You told me the character was calm and humane, and on the very first session they go full monster? Technical foul. Technical foul. It's so much more rewarding for everyone at the table when players have the necessary skill and attention to properly portray the character they envisioned. Thank you very much for listening. Take care, have fun, and don't forget to play.